Look at the thumbnail. 6 people screaming, 1 person still. Not performing stillness, genuinely still. Not deploying silence as a tactic, simply not disturbed. The people around him are in full noise, pointing, shouting, demanding a reaction. He is somewhere else entirely. His eyes are closed. There is the faint suggestion of a smile. Whatever they are saying has not reached the place in him from which his responses come. That quality, the unmoved center, is what this video is about. And it is significantly harder to build than the title suggests. The title says, never react, never explain, just ignore. These are instructions, things to do, but the thumbnail is not showing someone doing something. It is showing someone who is. The stillness is not a decision he is making in the moment. It is a condition he is in, and conditions are not produced by instructions. They are produced by work done in advance of the moment that tests them. Niccolò Machiavelli observed this distinction with precision throughout The Prince and the discourses on Livy. The prince who was governed by his passions, who reacted to every provocation, who explained himself to every critic, who needed the approval of the court to feel secure in his position, was in Machiavelli's analysis ungovernable. Not ungovernable in the sense of being wild or unpredictable. Ungovernable in the sense of being entirely controlled by whoever chose to provoke him. The mechanism of control was not force, it was the provocation, and the prince who could be provoked could always be controlled. In chapter 25 of The Prince, Machiavelli argued that the men who prosper are those who adapt their conduct to the nature of the times, who read what the situation actually requires, rather than responding from habit, from pride, or from the need to be right. The man who cannot adapt, who reacts from his own fixed patterns regardless of what the situation calls for, will fail, not because his patterns are bad, but because he is no longer making choices. He is being operated. By the end of this, you will understand why non-reactivity is not a tactic. You will encounter the 3 distinctions that separate the performed version from the genuine condition, and you will understand what the person in the thumbnail has actually built, not what they are doing. Part 1. The reactive person. The person who reacts to everything is governed by whatever provokes them next. Reactivity is not a personality flaw. It is a structural condition, one that most people are in most of the time because the conditions of social life produce it. You are embedded in relationships that carry expectations. You are observed by people whose opinions of you have material consequences. You exist in systems that reward certain kinds of response and punish others. The pressure to react, to defend when you are accused, to explain when you are misunderstood, to engage when you are challenged is not paranoia. It is an accurate reading of a social environment that frequently does reward the responsive and punish the silent. The problem is not the pressure. The problem is what happens when you respond to it automatically, when the reaction is triggered rather than chosen. Because triggered reactions are, by definition, under the control of whoever triggers them. And once people understand which triggers produce which reactions in you, they have a navigational tool for your behaviour that is more reliable than your own intentions. Machiavelli watched this operate in Florentine politics with the cold precision of a man who had been personally destroyed by it. He watched capable princes lose territory, alliances, and eventually power. Not because their enemies were stronger, but because their enemies were better at provoking the reactions that undermined them. A prince who could be made angry would, in his anger, make decisions that served his enemies more than himself. A prince who needed to be understood would, in his explaining, revealed the positions that gave opponents their angles. A prince who required the court's approval would, in his pursuit of it, compromise the decisions that his actual position required. The reactive person is not weak. They may be highly intelligent, politically capable, and strategically sophisticated in many respects. What they lack is the specific capacity to not be moved by the mechanism of provocation. And that specific lack is the lever. It is the single point at which everything else they have built can be operated against them. Here is what the reactive pattern looks like in practice. Someone challenges your position, and you feel the pull to defend it, not because defending it serves your goal in the interaction, but because being challenged produces an automatic defensive response. Someone misinterprets you, and you feel the pull to clarify, not because the clarification serves you, but because being misunderstood produces an automatic corrective impulse. Someone ignores you, and you feel the pull to re-establish contact, not because the contact serves you, but because being ignored triggers an anxiety about your own standing that requires resolution. None of these pulls are irrational. They are, in most contexts, socially functional. The problem arises when they operate without your choosing them, when the response is automatic rather than selected. At that point, you are not in your own driver's seat. You are in theirs. Consider what this means in aggregate. Every time you respond to an argument you did not want to be in, you have not lost the argument, you may have won it, but you have confirmed that you can be pulled in. Every time you explain yourself to someone whose interpretation you did not need to change, you have demonstrated that their interpretation matters to you enough to spend your energy on it. Every time you engage with a provocation that did not deserve your engagement, you have taught the person who provoked you exactly which buttons still work. The reactive person is not weak. They may be highly capable in many respects. They are simply paying a tax on every interaction that the non-reactive person does not pay. And over time, accumulated across hundreds of interactions, that tax becomes an enormous sum. Part 2. What non-reaction actually requires. You cannot decide not to react. You can only build the conditions under which the reaction does not arise. Most of what is written and said about non-reaction presents it as a decision. When someone provokes you, choose not to respond. When someone challenges you, choose silence. This advice is not wrong. The pause before response is genuinely useful, but it is incomplete in a way that matters, because you cannot decide your way to the quality the thumbnail is showing. That quality is not a decision made in the moment of provocation. It is the consequence of something built in the time before the provocation arrived. The specific thing that needs to be built is not technique. It is genuine non-dependence on the outcomes that the provocation is threatening. The person who is provoked by a challenge to their status is provoked because their sense of themselves is partially dependent on that status being acknowledged. The person whose sense of themselves does not require external acknowledgement of their status cannot be provoked by its withdrawal. Not because they have decided not to react, because there is nothing in that particular place for the provocation to land. This is Machiavelli's actual argument about political independence. The prince, who built his position on genuine foundations, on institutions, on demonstrated competence, on the structural capacity to function regardless of whether any particular person's approval was present, was genuinely less reactive than the prince who had built his position on court opinion. Not because he was practicing non-reaction, because the lever that the court's opinion represented had been structurally removed. The foundation was not there to be threatened. Let me be direct about what this means practically. The person who wants to stop being reactive in arguments about their competence needs to become genuinely more confident in their own competence. Not perform confidence, but build it through the accumulation of real evidence. The person who wants to stop being reactive to being ignored needs to develop enough genuine interest in their own life that other people's attention becomes less necessary. The person who wants to stop being reactive to criticism needs to develop such a clear and evidence-based relationship with their own standards that the gap between external criticism and their internal assessment becomes the primary reference point, not the criticism itself. None of this is quick. None of it is accomplished by deciding to behave differently in the moment. It is accomplished by the patient, unglamorous work of actually becoming the thing the moment requires, of building the internal architecture that makes the genuine stillness possible. This is a more demanding prescription than the source material offers, and I want to be honest about that. The source material tells you to practice silence, to be strategically unavailable, to withhold your attention from the unworthy. These instructions are not useless. The pause before response is genuinely valuable. Selective attention is a real discipline, but they are addressing the surface of the problem rather than its root. And a surface solution to a root problem produces, at best, a managed version of the condition. A person who is performing non-reactivity while remaining fundamentally reactive underneath, which is a harder and lonelier place to be than simply being reactive. If this kind of thinking is useful to you, the ideas that don't get softened, the ones that actually ask something of you, subscribe to Wise Daily. That's what we're here for. The source material this script is built from presents non-reactivity as a weapon, something to deploy against enemies, critics, people who drain your energy. This framing is seductive and wrong, not because enemies and draining relationships do not exist, they do, but because treating non-reactivity as a weapon means it remains tactical rather than genuine. The person who is performing non-reaction is still reactive. They are just managing the expression of the reaction. And the difference between managed reaction and genuine equanimity is something most people can feel, even if they cannot name it. Part 3. The three distinctions. The three distinctions that separate the performed version from the genuine condition are precise enough to be diagnostic. Applied honestly, they reveal where you actually are. The first distinction is between strategic silence and genuine non-attachment to the outcome of the conversation. Strategic silence is the decision not to respond, usually because responding would give the other person what they want, or because silence is calculated to produce a particular effect. It is still reactive, just in the opposite direction. The person deploying strategic silence is thinking about the provocation. They have decided to withhold a response, but the withholding is itself a response. Genuine non-attachment is different. The provocation does not produce a strong impulse either way, because the outcome of the specific interaction, whether the other person is satisfied, unsatisfied, confused, or impressed, is simply not where your primary orientation is located. The test. When you are silent in a charged situation, are you monitoring its effect? Are you aware of the other person's response to your silence and deriving something from it? Satisfaction at their frustration or anxiety about their interpretation? If so, you are still reactive. The silence is tactical. Genuine non-attachment to the outcome means you are simply not tracking it with the same intensity, because the outcome does not carry the same weight. The second distinction is between selective availability and genuine freedom from the need for others' attention. Selective availability, being deliberately hard to reach, not responding immediately, managing your presence, can produce useful effects. But if it is practiced as a technique to generate interest or to protect a status that depends on appearing sought after, it remains fundamentally reactive. You are still organized around other people's attention. You are managing its distribution rather than needing it less. The person practicing strategic silence is still tracking the conversation they chose not to enter. The person practicing selective availability is still aware of whose attention they are managing and why. The person who has arrived at genuine equanimity is not tracking either, not because they have decided not to, but because their primary orientation is elsewhere. The third distinction is between calculated inaction and genuine equanimity about what proceeds. Calculated inaction is the deliberate choice to let a situation develop without intervening, usually because you have assessed that intervention costs more than it gains. This is a useful strategic capacity, but it still requires a level of monitoring and control. You are watching the situation, assessing it, deciding. Genuine equanimity is a different thing. A settled relationship with what you can and cannot control, such that the non-intervention is not a decision made against resistance, but a natural consequence of not being particularly attached to the specific outcome. The test for this one is specific. Imagine a situation that is developing in a direction you would prefer it not to go. Can you genuinely not intervene, not because you have decided the cost is too high, but because your investment in the particular outcome is light enough that the development, whatever it produces, is manageable? If the answer is no, if the situation still produces in you a significant level of monitoring, a checking, attention about how it resolves, then you are practicing calculated inaction, not equanimity. Both are better than reactive intervention, but only one of them is the quality the thumbnail is showing. Machiavelli was working toward this distinction throughout The Prince, though he never quite named it explicitly. He was most interested in the external conditions, the structures, alliances, and institutions that give the prince a stable foundation. But implicit in his analysis is the recognition that the external conditions only work if the prince can hold them, if his internal stability is sufficient to make use of what the external foundation provides. The prince who has built solid external foundations but remains internally reactive will eventually be provoked into undermining them. The external work is necessary. It is not sufficient. Part 4. The unmoved center. The person in the thumbnail has not built a wall between themselves and the crowd. They are not insulated by physical distance, by power, or by the absence of stakes in the interaction. The crowd is right there. The noise is immediate. The fingers are pointing, and they are still. What they have built is not a defense against the crowd. It is something that makes the defense unnecessary. They have built enough of an internal life, enough clarity about what they actually value, enough evidence of their own competence to hold their own standards without external confirmation, enough genuine alternatives that no single relationship or outcome is catastrophic to lose, that the provocation does not find the purchase it is looking for. It lands and nothing happens. Not because they are blocking it, because the thing it was aimed at is not where it used to be. This is what Machiavelli was pointing at in chapter 25 when he described the man who adapts his conduct to the times. Someone whose responses are chosen rather than triggered, whose engagement with the world is deliberate rather than automatic, who can read what a situation actually requires and respond to that, rather than to the emotion the situation produces in him. This is not indifference. Machiavelli was not describing a man who does not care. He was describing a man who cares about the right things, in the right proportions, in the right order. The crowd in the thumbnail is not his enemy. They are the test. And the quality of the passing is not that he does not hear them. It is that what they say genuinely does not alter what he knows. That quality, the settled relationship with what you know about yourself, independent of what the room is saying about you in this particular moment, is built slowly. It is built by developing real competence in the things you claim to value, by building real relationships with people who know you accurately, so that you have a genuine corrective when you are wrong and genuine support when you are right, by building enough material independence that the fear of losing a specific source of income or approval is not what is governing your decisions, by practicing the pause not as a tactic, but as the deliberate choice to remain in your own frame for one more moment before entering someone else's. The crowd in the thumbnail is not his enemy. They are the test. And the quality of the passing is not that he does not hear them. It is that what they say genuinely does not alter what he knows. The source material this script was drawn from ends with a tribal instruction. Become untouchable. Say so in the comments. Make a public declaration of indifference. The framing is that non-reactivity is a power to acquire over others, a way of making them chase you, obsess over you, feel the weight of your silence. That framing is seductive and wrong about what the quality actually is. The person in the thumbnail is not untouchable because they have decided to be strategically unavailable. They are in possession of something the crowd cannot reach, not because they are protected from the crowd, but because the place the crowd is aiming at has been vacated by the work of building something more stable to stand on. Non-reactivity is not a weapon. It is a condition of someone who has done enough internal work that the mechanisms by which reactive people are controlled have less purchase. The way to build it is not to practice silence. It is to become the kind of person for whom the silence is natural. The crowd in the thumbnail is not his enemy. They are the test. What they say does not alter what he knows. That is the work. In the moments when you felt yourself pulled toward a reaction you did not choose, what was the specific thing being threatened? If that question landed, type "I return to center" in the comments. Not for me, but for you. And if this video gave you something real, please like it, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Wise Daily. Every video on this channel is built to give you one thing: the philosophical tools to live with more power, more clarity, and more intention. We'll see you in the next one. Machiavelli showed us the external architecture of non-reactivity, the structural foundations that remove the levers others use to provoke us. But there is a philosopher who wrote the internal manual, who described, from the inside in real time, what it feels like to practice this kind of equanimity in conditions of extreme pressure. That philosopher is Marcus Aurelius, and the meditations he wrote at the edge of an empire he did not choose, in the middle of wars he could not stop, is the subject of our next video.